Okay.
Okay, we're going to
Starts-
begin.
Okay, we got us a nice group here.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending our first workshop, and welcome to the Community Network Council. And this is the first of 4 workshops that we will be providing. The other 4 will be held in September, and it should have been attached to the registration. So I'm just going to go over a little bit of about CNC and this purpose. CNC came out of the community. We were addressing inequities within the community, doing advocacy work, dealing with the city of Kent as well as the Kent School District, looking at disproportionality and discipline and attendance and other issues within the school district as well as the city of hiring. About six years ago, we started to work on academic excellence for Black and Brown students. And we've been focused on that ever since. We provide mentoring, one-on-one mentoring with the students in the schools. We do family engagement, working with the families individually, addressing some of their needs and concerns related to education and other items. And we do professional development for educators. We have courses designed for teachers. Teaching Black students is one of them. Next, I would like to allow any of the dignitaries to introduce themselves and give their titles.
Why don't we start with Deborah Intonman, since she was the first one.
Hi, Deborah.
Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Deborah Intonman. I am a elected to represent the 47th Legislative District. I was also a part of the Police Accountability Work Group who helped to create and draft a lot of the legislation that we may be talking about tonight. I am the Vice Chair of Higher Ed, and I am also on the Transportation Committee and the Justice Committee. Sorry, we changed the name. We changed the name of the committee. But it just for a second, I just lost it. But
I know how that is.
Thank you, Deborah. Mia.
Hi, my name is Mia Gregerson. I represent the 33rd Legislative District, and I'm currently the Vice Chair of Appropriations. I'm also on State Government and Tribal Relations, one of the Vice Chairs of the Members of Color Caucus, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
And Barbara, I'm Senator Kaiser from the 33rd Legislative District, and I want to thank everybody for participating in this conversation. I am the Senate President Pro Tem, Chair of the Labor, Commerce, and Tribal Affairs Committee, and a long-term member of the Senate. And it's been a real awakening, I would say, in that institution in the years, with the help of people like Mia and Deborah and many others who've joined us in the last few years. So it's a very good time to have these conversations.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm Brenda Fincher, City Council member in Kent. I also serve on the King Conservation District, the King County Mental Illness and Drug Dependency Advisory Committee, and chair our soon to be revised Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Brenda. Anyone else? Well, thank you for attending. I would like to introduce our facilitator for this evening. I'll say only good things about him, Mr. Melvin Tate.
Okay.
He's the CNC's educational advisor. He's retired from the Kent School District, a longtime friend, and he will be facilitating the event today. With that, on that note, I'm going to introduce, since many of you heard, Aubrey Shinholster is CNC's Vice President. Where did he go? Oh, there you are. He will go over some of the logistics for today. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm the reason we had some of these technical difficulties. I did the integrated Eventbrite Zoom thing. Never again, don't use it, just send out a regular Zoom link. But so as we go through this event tonight, Melvin will ask questions of the two chiefs who are here. And we want to try to make sure that everyone can ask questions that they want to, but in an orderly fashion or in an orderly manner. So we kind of have time that we've set aside for each question. So if your question is not answered, if everyone tries to ask questions at once, we'll go to just reading the questions from the chat. But if your question is not answered, it will be answered at a later time and posted on our website, which I will make sure everyone has a copy of after this.
Okay, so my turn.
Okay, go ahead, Melvin.
So the purpose of this particular event, one of four, is to discuss where the community and policing might go from here in order to provide the best police services for BIPOC communities. The discussion will focus on healing and dealing with issues going forward in ways that foster healthy relationships. You might notice I'm reading this. Might also foster, might also reduce trauma, reduce anxiety, and reduce distrust, while simultaneously fostering health, synergy, compassion, and safety. That's the purpose of this particular meeting. And again, it is being recorded as we speak. So I have a co-facilitator, and I think this might be the time to introduce him, since his name has been, since his name hasn't been mentioned as a co-facilitator. And I would like to ask Commander Robert Hollis of the Kent Police Department to share a little bit about himself and say related to his police work and to his role in the City of Kent Police Department. I asked him to co-facilitate in the spirit of trying to set at least one example tonight of, say, police and community partnership. So could you speak, Commander Hollis?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Melvin. So hello, everybody. My name is, I'm Commander Robert Hollis, but my friends call me Bobby. So if you see me out and about, please feel free to call me Bobby. I am currently our race and equity commander for the Kent Police Department. I'm very fortunate that Chief Padilla had some foresight to kind of recognize how important it is that we have good relations with our community members, and was able to create this position full-time for me to find ways of reaching out to others, you know, working with community members that we just haven't dealt with on a very regular basis. So reaching out to more disadvantaged, reaching out to more kind of out groups, if you will. But our hope is that we want to be able to reach out to those that maybe even might be afraid of us, even those that might be look at us with a skeptical eye, because we feel that the only way for our profession to get better and to grow is to build bridges. And we have to build bridges between community members that maybe we don't always speak with. And this was a great way to at least start moving in that direction in order for us to really understand what our community's needs are and to really listen and start working towards some action so that we can start all moving and healing together. So that's just a little bit about me. I'll be asking both the chiefs some questions as we go tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing the conversations and hearing the input from all of you that might be out here listening to us today. So thank you for inviting me into this space today.
Thank you. So now I'd like to introduce our special guest, Chief Padilla and of the Kent Police Department, and Chief Bowe of the Burien Police Department. And I want to ask them to share a little of their backgrounds and their general philosophy of policing, and take a couple minutes to do that. And feel free to do that also as you answer some of the questions that we're going to be asking you. Who wants to go first?
I'll jump in there since I was last on. I'm glad I could figure out the technical difficulties. So we're here. I will admit I was a little panicky because I'm very excited to be here tonight. So good evening, everybody. Raf Padilla, I've been with the city of Kent since January of 1997. So coming up on 25 years. I've been the chief for just a little bit over 3.5 years now, coming up on 4. Prior to that, I was a police officer in Honolulu, Hawaii, and for 5 years there before leaving Paradise to come to our great state and the city of Kent. And there's a lot of reasons that I did that, but primarily it was about opportunity for me and my family. It was the tail end of the Microsoft boom, and this was one of the best places in the country to be a police officer. So I made the move, and it's been a great job. You talked about service leadership, Mr. Tate. I am grounded in the service leader model, servant leader model. I won't get too deep. I won't get too spiritual on everybody, but the foundation for that is my faith. And that is what permeates how I look at things. My core belief is, as a leader, my first obligation is to serve others. And I also believe that the higher you go in your rank and stature, the more your responsibility grows in that regard. So there's that. So I'll keep it brief. I know we have a lot to cover, but that's just a little bit about me. I'm a father, 4. I've got 2 dogs who might bark sometime during this presentation, so forgive that. My wife's planning on making ribs here. I'm not sure how that's going to work because we're in the kitchen, but we'll get through all of those home office issues here shortly. But very pleased to be here. Nice to meet everybody, and good to see a lot of familiar faces and names. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Ted Bowe. I am the chief over in Burien. I've been working for King County in various capacities for 22 years now. I've been the chief of Burien for about 3.5 years. As I look at my philosophy, I have to look at kind of where I came from a little bit, as far as who I am and who my family is, and like Raf, what my faith is, because it guides in a lot of ways the decisions and the way I view the world. My wife's a school teacher. I got 2 young daughters. I coach their sports, and at the end of the day, I believe this is a uniform I put on. I think it's something I do for a profession. I don't think it's who I am as a human being. I think who I am as a human being is all of those other things. A community member, a father, on the homeowners association, all those things I do in my community as well. So I think we're going to talk a little bit as we go through, but one of my philosophies is we have to really humanize this profession. We have to see beyond our uniforms and see beyond the people that we meet in the field, and really start to get down to, seeing each other like humans and interacting like humans and building relationships like humans. I think that's where the healthy work needs to be done. And I clearly think that there's a ton of work to do in that realm. So my background is largely customer service. I went through that realm, waiting tables and working retail, and really spending a lot of time understanding what customer service looks like. And I think that is one of the lost arts in our profession, is centering around your customer and letting customer service guide how we do our work and what work we do. So that's a little bit about where I come from, a little bit about who I am. And like Raf, my vicious pug here is all about going after the Amazon delivery person if they happen to show up. So she is all 14 pounds of ferocious, but you might hear her in the background.
Hey, thanks to both of you for accepting our invitation. I mean, not every police chief would step out and address these issues. And so we really do appreciate you joining us and being our special guest. So question number one, as police chiefs, you must understand the trauma that a Black family and other BIPOC families must endure as the family discuss how they must protect themselves against police. These family discussions are exacerbated by various media outlets with concrete evidence that portray some police as their oppressor, their enemy, and someone who might kill them once they are stopped for a minor issue. Considering that, what kinds of activities are your departments doing and or plan to do to help provide relief from this kind of trauma in some communities? As an example, positive outreach activities in the communities, officer training programs, and how can the community help with that? So maybe Chief Padilla, you want to start again, or shall we go to Chief Bo with the first one?
Either way, I mean, probably, to be fair, maybe we should go back and forth as to who answers first, but since I've already grabbed the mic, why don't we go here? I'm going to speak quickly because I think this is an outstanding question. And I break it down in a couple categories. The first one is outreach and engagement. Second is culture and policy. And the last part is training, is how we are, the things that we're doing. So under outreach and engagement, the goal with these programs is to interact with the community in a non-law enforcement role, right? Engaging human to human, not being there when there's a crisis, and focusing particularly with our youth and our BIPOC community members, so they can see us in a positive way. They can see that human element that like Ted talked about, this is a uniform, this is a job I do, but underneath it's a human, and try to let that out. We've got several initiatives. I'll hit on some highlights. This summer, we initiated a program called Cones and Cops through our community education program, totally driven by our operational level staff. And we've been in the communities at various apartment complexes, particularly the complexes most stricken with violent crime, shootings, and homicides. And our officers are going out with our community education leaders and serving ice cream, just going out in the afternoon, standing by, serving ice cream, having conversations, and portraying us in a different light. We've done a series of community walks up on our East Hill over the last few years to reduce violence, to encourage and show the community we value them, we want to support them, and we want them to lead the way in taking back their community from some of the violence and criminal activity that's going on. It's been hugely successful. We've done 4 years of celebrations. One was this past Sunday. Huge credit to our faith-based organization through Pastor Bowles and Redeemed by the Blood Kojic Church. We have a youth board through Living Well Kent. Bobby and I both work with their youth policy board and have been doing that. Today I went out to their back to school drive, and they had hundreds of people lined up and they were serving. So we went out and we're very connected with them, helping their youth get a better understanding of what we do, and listening more often than not, listening to their presentations and the great research they're doing in regards to these incredibly difficult issues. We have our Explorer program, our Teen Summer Academy. We have our youth leadership board through our high schools. We have a leadership conference every year. One of the great volunteers I'll give a plug to Bobby, and that is his wife, Cindy, is a huge champion of that program and helps us facilitate that. And then I'm going to give you a huge preview, and a couple on this call already see it. Kent has started the Community Immersion Law Enforcement Program. And what this is we are taking officers who we have hired, and before they get any police training, go to the academy, get any police indoctrination, it's going to that value of service. So right now we have our first recruit who's been plugged in with World Relief. And as you've been following probably in the media, World Relief is bracing for impact with the massive influx of Afghanistan, relocated people from that country that are fleeing the Taliban there. We have a brand new recruit officer who's going to spend 2 months doing nothing but connecting with our BIPOC community, connecting with the immigrant population, and serving through that organization. And this will be something that every new police officer in the city of Kent comes in, they will be plugged in with a service provider with a focus on the BIPOC community and youth. And they're going to start their careers spending time serving the community. The program is designed so they'll serve for 2 months, go to the academy, and then go back after they've graduated. Let it be known that they're a police officer and serve in that capacity. My belief is this program is going to set them up with the heart and mindset of serving first and caring about people and seeing people, because our candidates that come in, the recruits that are hired, they're still in the 70% for people that do not have extensive background in diverse cultures. We are immersing them at the very start of their careers. I think it's going to pay off down in the line. I want to make sure I'm conscientious of time, but we've got a lot of culture and policy issues. One of our bright, shining examples of that is I created a race and equity commander position, and you've heard Bobby Hollis, Commander Hollis, is in large and in charge on that. In addition to the connections like tonight's meeting, he is setting policy and culture. He's developing our strategic plan. He is reviewing everything that we do, from hiring to promotions to assignments to internally, externally, to remove any racial bias and barriers that we may not be conscientious of, and a lot of that. And last, I'll just talk on the training. We're going to talk about implicit bias training later. We have rolled out a ton of training. The training that some of the people on this call, like Councilmember Fincher, have been participatory in alongside with our police officers in regards to relationship building, in regards to building trust. We brought out Mr. Dwayne Bryant from Chicago. He did a series on the new conversation, which is very much in line with the conversation we're having tonight. And so I can go on and on. We're doing ABLE training, which is a assisted or active bystander law enforcement program through Georgetown Law School, which will train officers on how to appropriately intervene and prevent excessive force or to report it. The culture of being each other's caretakers in terms of making sure we're all accountable to each other, then the public. Implicit bias training we've conducted through Dr. Marks. This is all recent. This I'm talking about, this is all within the last 6 to 8 months. So I can go on and on and on, but we're here through outreach, training, policy, and culture. There we go.
All right. So yeah, we can save some of that for talk about the implicit bias. And but it's really good to hear, that all that you're doing and how you're on top of these things. One thing that I'm going to ask Chief Bo to do is, when you get to that point, also share how the community might be involved in helping with some of these activities. But so the same question to you then, Chief Bo. Thank you.
Thank you. So I want to start out with part of the presumption of this question is that all officers are aware, that all community members are aware. And I think one of the challenges is sometimes helping officers walk in the shoes of somebody other than themselves, helping them see the world through that other lens. That empathy for my view of the world comes from my view of the world. It's mine. It's from my world and my life experiences and my friends and what I see on TV and my culture, and that creates my worldview. So I'm going to talk about a couple programs that are important to us. The first one we started a couple of years ago is called student-led training. And the idea behind student-led training is we worked with the school district to come up with a class where the students guided the curriculum. And over the course of the quarter, they got to design what were the things they wanted to teach an officer. What did they want to tell an officer? What did they want an officer to know about their life? And then at the end, their final project was actually delivering training to the officers. So they got to create it and tell us, what did you want an officer to know about you? What do you want an officer to know about your experiences or your impressions? That same group also did a council presentation with that material as well. And it was powerful for the officers to hear from the lens of the young people. This is what it feels like when these things occur in our world. And we may not agree with everything. We may not see that lens, but at least it starts that empathetic conversation of hearing what it looks like from the perspective of a young person. I can never be a young person of color. That's never going to be a lens I can hold, but I can be empathetic and listen to what that might feel like. And it's not my life experience. Another program we do is Badges and Barbells, which is a after-school weightlifting program. And it's important because what it does is two things. One, it keeps young people engaged during that time when often young people get in trouble, which tends to be that window immediately after school when you go home and mom and dad might still be working, or you're hanging out with your friends. And that's when you find young people get themselves in trouble. Idle hands get in trouble every time. So one, it keeps them busy. The other thing is the coaches for the weightlifting are police officers. So police officers go there, they take their uniform off, they put on their workout clothes, and they spend time with the young people. And what you find is the lens from both sides changes. All of a sudden, the police officers see them as individuals. They know their name. They interact with them on that first name basis. And conversely, it builds the trust in reverse that uniform's off, right? You can actually move past that initial view of a person standing there in a uniform, and rather now you're an individual and a human being who's working together. And now you have that positive engagement that's occurring around a healthy activity. So I think those are two programs. We do all of the same programs that you're going to hear across the dimension with most police departments do explorer programs and teen academies and summer programming. And I think all of that is important. And I also think it's important that we leverage our positions to really support organizations that do preventative work. So sometimes law enforcement officers are not, the best thing we can do is never have that person involved in the system where they're having that engagement with us in a negative light down the road. And a lot of times that's really supporting those community and preventative organizations that are doing good work. You know, somebody playing soccer is a good thing for public safety. It keeps them busy, it keeps them active, and it gives them positive opportunities and role modeling opportunities in their life, which will keep them from maybe having that downtime that gets in trouble in the future. So these are all different things we're doing around this realm of programming to really work on humanizing the officer and also humanizing the community members that we're breaking down that disconnect that's occurring.
And how can I did hear you mention about the community, and so how can they get, see, when you say community groups and preventive groups, what, can you be more specific about that, about what those groups might look like? Would the CNC fit into that kind of a group that you're talking about?
I was saying one thing is this right here. One thing is, engaging the schools, Badges and Barbells school-based programs. So we're working with teachers and counselors and other programs that are active in the school. Currently, I'm working with a group called Cultures United, which is a soccer club that's operating in North Highline, but it really is a leadership program for young people that they built into the soccer club. So really supporting those organizations is how we as police chiefs sometimes can benefit this relationship by just being there as a supporter of something that is non-criminal justice or non-systems oriented.
Okay, so you have any questions for us, Aubrey?
Listen, well, why don't we move ahead, Melvin, and then the next question. Anyone who has questions after the chief speak, if you have any questions, please type them in the chat, or actually, I guess we could ask right now. If anyone has any questions, can you ask? Feel free to ask right now. Okay, so we have a question. Chief Bo, do your officers volunteer for programs such as Badges and Barbells, or is that done as part of the job on shift time?
The answer is yes. It is definitely some of both. The school resource officers will do it at the end of their shift. So it's shift time. We also have several officers, including the officer who formed it, Sergeant Andy McCurdy, who created the initial concept behind Badges and Barbells. And that work was their life passion. It's a 501c nonprofit, 501c3 nonprofit that they use for all of the funding. It's several private investors who have put their investments in to buy the equipment. And then several of the coaches do it on their personal time. So the answer is kind of both, depending on the school. And it's expanded to, I don't know how many schools throughout the region now. There's probably 8 or 10 schools in the region now that are doing a variant of Badges and Barbells.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. Melvin?
Okay, then let me see. Commander Hollis is going to ask question number 2.
All righty. So Chief Bo, I know you just finished talking, but we'll go ahead and get started with you first on this one. So it must be traumatizing experience for police officers and their families to consider that when an officer leaves his or her home to perform his or her duties, they may return injured or may not even return home again. How do you prepare your officers as well as their families to deal with that type of trauma in their lives?
I thought a lot about this question when I read it ahead of time. And one of the things I think that's most important for officers is maintaining health. And I mean that both from the physical standpoint, stress management standpoint, spiritual standpoint, as well as your mental health. We know that when we hire officers, we put them through thorough background investigations. We put them through psychological analysis. We go through every testing under the sun to make sure that we're hiring healthy individuals when they walk through the door. And we know that this profession breaks them down. We know suicide rates are high. We know alcoholism rates are high. We know the washout rates are high. We know life expectancy is grossly shortened in this profession versus other professions. And the reality is all that lives around that health. And that you can't, in my mind, expect somebody who's not personally healthy to deliver an exceptional customer service or an exceptional product when they go out on the street. If you aren't happy with yourself, if you aren't having a good day every day, you're going to go out and deliver poor service. And what that's going to reflect like is damaging the trust with our community every single time. So I think the most important thing for me is really balancing the mental health programs that we have in place, the peer support we have in place. I think it's incredibly healthy to make sure. I think every police officer should have some sort of a mental health professional they're working with. I think everybody should have some sort of spirituality. And I don't mean that you have to belong to any particular church, but I think you should have some sort of a release through something bigger than yourself. I think it is essential that we support families, because one of the things I also find is officers who have an unhealthy family life tend to have an unhealthy work life. If you're taking care of business at home, if you're supported at home, if you're doing right by your family, you normally will find that you'll be able to deliver a much better product on the field. So we have spousal support programs. When new spouses come into the organization, we try to assign them peer spouses so that they have somebody who can work with them in understanding exactly those fears you're talking about. Like I said, my wife's a school teacher. We don't come from a family of law enforcement. And it was a huge undertaking to get used to that. You're going to work graveyard shift and there's all this fear. And a lot of it is way over exaggerated in our profession, but it's still real. And the fear exists in the mind of my wife when I leave at 10 o'clock at night to go work a graveyard shift, whether it's real or perceived. And I think later we're going to talk a little bit about how that fear, real or perceived, is 100% valid in all sides of this conversation as well, that it impacts the way you're going to react to something because it's very real. So kind of a long answer going around the edges there, but I really think it's important that we look at it through that lens of remaining healthy all the way around. I also will tell you, I don't hang out with cops off duty. I think that's also a really healthy thing is I go home and I don't talk cop when I go home. If somebody walks in my house and wants to start talking about cop, I'll kick them out. That's what I do for a living. I'm at home. Let's hang out and talk about stuff like home. And I got young kids. They don't need to be hearing cop stuff all day long at home either. So I think healthy life balance is also really important.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. Chief Padilla, I'll pose the same question to you.
Okay, well, in addition, like what Ted was saying, we do have some of those things, and I'll get through some of our application in this area, but really it comes down to two things. Number one, we really tried to work hard to remove the stigma that for many decades has been with if you seek help, then you're weak or you're less than, or there's a problem, and we've really worked to curtail that. And the other major shift that we made in our department is we made it part of the job. For all of my career coming up on almost 30 years now, the fitness, the wellness, the mental health, the emotional, the spiritual, all of that wellness, important wellness factors that help us be resilient to stress, help us be more stable and balanced in our approach to our work and more relatable to the community, and keep us out of doing weird things because of stress, are important. But it's always been, that's on your time. Your workout time is on your time. Go get help on your own time. And if it's that important, my belief and my vision for the department was that it had to be part of their workday. It had to be something integrated in what we do, not only culturally, but through our actual work performance. So we implemented this last year wellness sessions. Now that got curtailed quite a bit because of COVID, but we are putting significant resources in to building into our schedule opportunities to get spiritual help, mental health, physical. Most officers are choosing just that physical release, right? Like a workout session and whatnot, which is a great start. But we're even looking at things such as financial wellness, because an officer who has bills to pay is a red flag, right? It's someone who's not making their financial obligations and has this kind of responsibility. That stress is something we're looking at as well. And so we've really upgraded our wellness program. It's been muted because of some restrictions with budget and whatnot, but we are on the path where the Kent Police Department will make wellness a weekly part of a scheduled thing that officers will participate in. On the side of removing the stigma, one of the things we did was we brought in mental health professionals and we just scheduled appointment times. So a mental health professional, police psychologist will come in and say, we're going to be here available on these dates and times, and please sign up for a session. And we have it completely run through our peer support team. So I have no awareness of it other than we're helping pay for it. And it's been really hugely successful. Some of our detectives who see a lot of the abuse and neglect calls, some of our sexual assault investigators in particular, we've done a 4 series now of workshops and sessions where we're bringing the mental health professionals to the officers, and we're not saying, hey, good luck, here's an EAP resource card, go get help. What we're saying is help's here, and we're making it a normal part of our culture to get plugged into that, including members of the command staff, so that it's normalized and people don't have that stigma. So those are some big changes that we've done. We have always had a strong peer support team made up of many representatives throughout the department. We have a strong chaplaincy program. I talked about incorporating wellness and fitness. We're going to keep going that. We're going to grow it. We have a very strong wives group, and that's what they call themselves. It probably should be, partner spouse group, but that's what they call themselves. And we take it more than just having the group available. We bring the wives group in for training, so they have an understanding of what's going on. One of the most recent workshops we did was what happens when your officer's involved in a deadly force encounter, so that they have at home an understanding of what their spouses are going to go through. I talked about the on-site mental health and our wellness team. We went and invested in 8 what we call functional fitness instructors. They facilitate the on-duty workouts and some of the other non-traditional wellness things. And we're connected with a lot of groups. We bring in groups like Behind the Badge, Code 4 Northwest, and others who are providing counsel, particularly in the areas of PTSD, suicide prevention, and mental health. So we've done a lot there. We've made this a priority. I know there was some movement in the legislature to try and get some support for this. I hope that continues, but it is a priority right now. We're doing more than we used to. When Ted and I and Bobby started this career, if you had problems, you were on your own to fix it. And a lot of times that ended up in being in unhealthy ways, like, let's go out to the bar and drink and let's do unhealthy things. And we've moved a long way since that time. And I think it's a good move.
So Melvin, this time we do have a couple questions.
Okay. Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, I can go ahead and read it. So, and this may be in regards to question number 1, but the question is, and I'll just read it. May I ask whether the CNC school-based programs have worked with police-supported school programs, or are they in two different worlds? And would they be more effective if coordinated? So that might be a question for both the chiefs and our partners at CNC. What are your thoughts?
It's a good question.
It is. So let me make sure. This is Barbara. So let me start off by saying one of our first MOUs was with the Kent Police Department under Chief Strand. And we were performing the Pass the Ride Along program. We coordinated that for a couple of years with them. And on occasions right now, we still have people inquiring about that particular program. So we moved in the direction on academics. And especially with the high school kids, we do work with the school resource officers or the police department dealing with issues. Now, never consider whether they'd be more effective working together. I think it's always best if you can coordinate and work together jointly to help youth. So it's currently we do not have an official MOU or anything with the police department. One of the Kent Police Department officer is a volunteer with CNC. And I believe that the more you work together and coordinate, the more successful you are helping youth. I'm not sure if that answers the question completely.
Sounded good to me.
And Melvin, we also have a question from Eagle's Nest.
You want to read it, Aubrey?
Eagle's Nest, would you like to ask your question?
Okay, maybe they can ask it later.
Oh yeah, type it into the chat and I'll read it. Back to you, Melvin.
I think one more hand just went up.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd love to ask a question about innovation, technology, TikTok, YouTube, social media platforms. Are any of the great things that are going on, outreach, cultural training, being publicized on those platforms, maybe in partnership with kids, youth, to just show them it's not just the bad news that's happening with the popo, but maybe there's some good stuff going on. Excuse my neighborhood language, so sorry, I was just a flashback there. My bad. But I was just wondering, are you using any of those innovative platforms as a way to show the community some of the great things that are happening?
I can tell you, for me, the answer is yes. It's an interesting thing that I find when you look at the metrics behind what people react to, particularly on social media, you tend to get way more engagement to the negative than the positive, which I find is interesting because people always want us to tell our story, and then 500 people engage. And I tell you about the bank robber we arrested, the drug bust, and 200,000 people engage. And I'm like, it is hard to push it. Mainstream media does not help us. Again, I know this is a question a little bit further down, but mainstream media lives on the emotional reaction, and the emotions of fear and anger tend to get more people coming to view the story. So, and social media actually works in the same way, right? It works on the emotions. So negative emotions tend to drive more people to it than positive. That said, our best thing to do is continually put the message out there. I find that I'm now the old guy, so I have to go ask the young officers how they communicate, because admittedly, I don't know. I use Facebook, which I guess officially makes me antique by all of my new officer standards. So the biggest challenge for us is communicating with the young people and then getting them communicating. So I find like using the youth council is a great way to get messages out to young people, because they like to hear their friends talking about something good more than they want to hear a police officer talking about something good. So the more you can start generating that self-driven communication going on among the young people, I think the better off you are.
Yeah, and I would add to that. I agree that a lot of the traditional media doesn't work, but I would say we have found some incredible success through social media. And maybe it's a resource dedication thing. I'm very fortunate that I have a social media person dedicated to the police department out of our multimedia team. So that's a huge deal. And to the list of things that people react to, I would say that there is a lot of reaction to negative media, but I will also tell you that on occasion, some of our biggest posts, and we're talking for us, for the city of Kent, approaching 250,000 reactions to a media post is a big deal for our smaller city, right? But it's about like if it involves kids, rescuing kids, saving kids, and the only thing that beats kids and working with kids is pets. Post something about one of our canines and oh my goodness, it's on, it's viral in a heartbeat. We rescued a cat. So you guys may have seen this. We had a cat get into a police car that was in the drive-through of our Taco Time downtown. So an officer was going to go get a burrito. This feral cat runs into the engine compartment of the car. We had to call a tow company to lift the car up so we could get the cat out of there because it wouldn't come out. Somebody snapped a picture. Our social media team said, hey, this will get us some good feel, like we're human beings. We have funny stuff happen too. That post was over 200,000 hits. So,
Wow.
But to your point, and I forget who asked the question, we can do better in this regard. And so we've turned over, I am a dinosaur as well. I have social media because it's a requirement of my job. Otherwise, quite frank with you, I wouldn't have it. So I'm the guy saying, get off my lawn. And I realize that I'm the old guy, but so we've incorporated leveraging our younger officers who are much more savvy, who are much more relatable. And so we have them working on this as well. So we're doing pretty good. We can do a lot more.
And so we have the question from Eagle's Nest. How can you help the youth to work on goals and become a positive member in their community? That's for our chiefs.
For our chiefs, okay. I know I just got through talking, but I'll say that's a great question. I think a lot of, and I'm gonna throw Commander Hollis under the bus here a little bit, but I think it's about being connected in those spaces, right? We do a lot of work in the schools, but that can grow. But outside of that is being present, like with our youth council, our youth leadership board, through other engagements. We have our science class, but Bobby has touched upon something, and I want to give him credit in a program that we're hoping to get grant funding for. And I think the acronym is RAP. So Bobby, do you want to touch on that real quick on what we're doing if we get the money to come through?
Sure. RAP Youth is actually the name of the organization, but the name of the program is YPAR, which is Youth Participatory Action Research. And so the goal of that program is very similar to what Chief Bo was talking about with his the students that were giving the presentation to the officers, but we reach out to our youth. They will actually go out and do research for us. And in this particular case, it's helping me build our race and equity plan for the police department. So we have youth voice kind of participation in that process. And they build a plan. They learn how to do research. They learn leadership skills. But along the way, they're partnered with officers in which we help mentor these youth in how to do the research. But we also have the opportunity to sit down and talk with them about our line of work, what we do, what we experience on a day-to-day. But it's done so in more of a lower key, almost classroom-like environment. And so we're hoping to get, again, as Chief Padilla said, a grant to get that program up and running. And we're hoping that that will be yet another way that we can build a bridge between our youth, our community, and the police.
And the only thing I'll add to that before we turn it over to Chief Bo is we were very strong partners with Communities in Schools Kent. And so we had mentors assigned to that program. I'm going to be honest with you. I think mentorship, if we can facilitate mentorship, that speaks directly to this issue. But the honest part that I was talking about is the schools have been a little bit less reluctant, little with COVID and not being connected, and a little bit gun shy, so to speak, about connecting police with youth. So we're going to work through that. We're going to show them that we are a trusted source of mentorship, and hopefully we bring that back.
All right, we have a question from Representative. Oh, did I cut you off, Chief Ball? I don't want to cut you off.
No, the only thing I was going to say is one of the other big things is I look at the how do you help youth with goals. I think one of the big things is listening to them without judging what they're saying. I find a lot of times our young people have a greater passion for service than our generation probably did. And it's more a matter of listening to their dedication, their passion, and helping them understand how, and I use it as a recruiting tool. You want to be on the front end of making this change and having a different engagement with police and community, and having a different dialogue about how police communicate with young people. And the reality is they can take that passion and join this profession and be amazing police officers, like people who are driven to serve their community. That's what we're looking for that next generation, is a true spirit of service. And a lot of young people just don't view that this is how they can do it. And it's a great job that you're making really good money. You got great benefits. You can take care of your family, and you can be on the front line of truly serving your community. So I think sometimes it's about listening to what they're saying and then helping them frame like the opportunities that are out there that support their passion.
Okay, thank you for that. Representative Gregerson.
Thank you. We've talked a little bit about wellness. We've talked about media, youth. I'm curious about mainstream media. It feels like when I look at South King County and I see what gets reported about our communities, the amount of trauma we suffer from only hearing negative context when it comes to what's happening. You talk a lot about these deeper connections with community groups. Do you feel like you can use your individual presence to be able to help influence mainstream media to start talking about our communities in a better light? And I know you mentioned that this is a small city, but Kent is the 6th largest city in Washington. It's very large and very, very much important to the state. So I'm interested in hearing what we can do to be better stewards of the good people. There's so much good in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. We have evolved over time, to your point, to recognize that we need to be good partners with the media, because when you don't build those relationships, when you're not constantly engaging them, not when it's just bad news, but when you have opportunities to invite them to cover things such as the community celebration we had this past weekend. If you don't have those relationships, you don't get those opportunities, they don't seek you out. And so we have worked very hard to establish strong partnerships so that they're covering the positive stories. King 5 did a piece this last weekend, and the remarks from the reporter was, please give us more leads on good stories, because we want to feel like we're doing more than just reporting about all the tragedy in the world. It's interesting, it hadn't dawned on me that these journalists are out there and they have been impacted by having to report all the traumatic incidents time and time again. A light bulb went off in my head when the reporter was basically asking me, can you feed us more positive stories? So I think, to your point, there's an opportunity. The law enforcement has to really embrace and not see media as an adversary, but embrace them as an opportunity to get their message, who they are, their identity across. And so we're working really hard on that. I'm going to dote on Commander Bobby because he's Collis, because he's one of our PIOs. And so when we can, we need to do that. Where we struggle is that Bobby does that amongst the other 10 hats that he wears in the department. So does Assistant Chief Kasner, and so do I. So really and yes, we are the 6th biggest city, but on scale, we don't really have the resources, say, that Seattle has, where a team of people, this is what they do. And we're hoping to evolve to that, but we're not quite there. But to your point, media can be leveraged and partnered with, and we could do a better job there.
And I love my dog jumping on my lap here. I I love the idea of being close to the media. I think 100% transparency is the best thing you can do with the media, and be responsive and be there, handing them stories, giving them information. I also know that most of the research shows that mainstream media has less influence on people's perception of police and government than the relationships they have in their neighborhood or neighborhood associations. So it's that firsthand account. It's the people you're engaging with, the people you have relationships with, is actually a more powerful influencer of relationship and trust and legitimacy than mainstream media is when it comes to, at least when it comes to government. So I think the more that we are out there developing relationships with people and humanizing that relationship, I think that is almost a better use of our time than trying to convince mainstream media to report something different than what they want to report.
Okay, thank you. And one more question, then we'll do another question, and we'll have more question and answer. Ty, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. So I have two-part question. One, since Kent has over 133 languages, one thing I'm noticing with youth is we still have a lot of youth that's not being able to connect with our police because they're still fearful of a stigma. Our Hispanic culture, our different cultures in the African culture, not just African-American, but the African culture. So because they came from where the police, you know, it hasn't been as good background other than African-American. So how do we create some type of system or something where the police are being more involved in other, more minority type of subgroups that the youth can be part of and understand that the police are not villains? That's one. And second, I think I was reading the question that, and I'm piggybacking on the question that Teresa put about the drugs, because one of the things that I'm dealing with the youth is we're really, really dealing with drugs and addictions and suicidal and depression from our youth. And I'm glad that Chief Padilla, that you did talk about the community events that we have, but I'm gonna be honest with you, because I was there, we are not grabbing a lot of our youth. A lot of the youth wasn't there. We had smaller children there, but we're still not grabbing the youth like we need to in these community events. The last big community event that I know that Kent did that grabbed a large amount of youth is when we had the You Me We in the showware. But there's something is happening with our youth in Kent where we're not engaging as with police and with them also, because there's a problem that's going on with our youth right now. So that's for the police. What can we do to engage minority and with drugs?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is that you have to foster a culture. There's my dog, sorry. Foster a culture that is open and makes the connections like tonight, right? So my offer to all of you is that when those opportunities arise, when there is a venue for that, you're going to know about it far sooner than I'm going to know about it as the chief, right? And so make sure we're aware. Make sure you're sending us the invites. I will tell you right now, we are growing in that space, but we have capacity to say, if there is a venue that you know about where we can reach the older youth that you're speaking about there, Ty, then get us there and we will be there. We will meet you. We will meet your request and we will be there. And hopefully we can do more than just show up to an event. Hopefully we can show up and start developing relationships and get connected for the long haul. So that's one of the ways I think that we can do it. I think the other way, and I don't mean this to sound like a cop-out, is we need to do more to find the resources within law enforcement departments that get us away from the emergency response culture in the way that it is now. I will tell you that probably 90 to 95% of my resources are tied up in a 911 call response. That means what's left over for me in a very busy city, all right, with a lot of calls, probably more calls per capita than most cities in our state, is I've got the limited resources there that I would much rather put into being out in the community, generating those contacts, establishing mentor programs if we can. But right now it is a resource-driven thing. So we need to rethink how we look at when we establish the funding for the police department, can we get more people out of emergency call response and into that youth engagement part of it, right? So it's a combination of connecting like we are here tonight, and a combination of making it a priority in terms of staffing, which we could spend another whole 2 hours on that issue right now. I won't go into it, which is a huge challenge for law enforcement, right? So those would be some of the things I would say that we could do, and I'll turn it over to Ted.
Thanks, Chief. The only thing I would follow up on is I often look at my audience, and if my audience is young people and I have a room full of parents, I have the most powerful influence around young people decision-making I can have. So developing relationships with parents is very powerful, where they can give you credibility. You can empower parents to have hard conversations with their young people. I think it's something my mayor did, where he worked with the school district and looked at kids that were having disciplinary issues in the middle school, and he hosted community meetings with their parents. So he identified kids that were having difficulty and then engaged the parents, and then brought in people who could talk to the parents about legal rights and responsibilities, people who talk to the parents about different ideas for how to coach challenging children through difficult times, drug and alcohol counseling, resources. But he facilitated, empowered the parents, as opposed to saying, hey, police, go solve it after it occurs. Instead, let's use our resources, really empower the family unit to be the primary source of trying to make healthy decisions. So it's another way to look at police, as say, I talk about this team sport, right? Raising young people is a team sport. It's school teachers, it's counselors, it's ministry, it's police, it's parents. If we can all get on the same page, that is a very powerful tool for young people to help get them on the same page. So as we kind of talk about how do you get them on the right path, I think it's really when we all kind of work together and say, we're aligned. We want to help you. We want to support you. We understand kids do dumb things. That's what we're supposed to do. I guarantee you, I can only speak for myself, but I'm guessing probably every person on here has had moments in their life where they've been on a bad path, and somebody's been there to kick them in the backside and get them back on the right path. And I think recognizing that when we're all working together, we have a lot more opportunity to help that young person get back on a good path than if we're working apart.
Thank you very much for those questions. And we're going to move on to question number 3. And but before we do, I want to mention the fact that this conversation is going pretty much exactly like we wanted it to go, in terms of how we can work together, how we can interact. That's the main purpose of the discussion. And a major part of that is trying to find out what the police departments are doing now and how they're handling issues, and then maybe how the community can support that, because after all, the police departments are providing a service, and it is probably difficult to provide that service adequately without some kind of community input and direction and support. And so I'm glad to hear some of the things that the chiefs are saying. So question number 3, maybe we should skip this one and go to number 4, and perhaps even come back to number 3, because we're running short on time now. and so I'm going to skip question number 3, and then let's go to question number 4. And Bobby, you want to ask that question? I don't mind.
Yep. I can take it, no problem. So Chief Padilla, we'll go ahead and get started with you on this one. Do you support implicit bias training? If so, how is it implemented in our department relative to BIPOC communities? If not, how do you screen your officers to help prevent racial bias and other forms of bias from becoming a factor in encounters with communities of color?
Thanks, Bobby. So the answer to that is unequivocally yes. I'm very proud. Long before I was even the chief, Kent was one of the first departments to bring in Dr. Friedel to do implicit bias training. She was recommended through, if you remember, President Obama's 21st century policing. One of the trainings recommended was her, and we were one of the first in the state to get her here. We did that in conjunction with our, at the time, what was named the Diversity Task Force, which is now our Race and Equity Advisory Board. And we went through that training with our community, with our BIPOC community members. And then we also had that training throughout with our department. So that's ongoing. We've done recent training with Dr. Marks, and there's a huge emphasis right now. So that continues. It's mandatory curriculum at CJTC. But towards the issue of screening for bias, people ask us about what we do for background checks. And my response to that is, we don't do background checks. We do background investigations. And really, we do everything from mental health to financial investigations, and we also do criminal investigations. We approach it in a very serious way, and I'm very glad to see the improvements to the state requirements that came out through House Bill 5051. But I will say that Kent still takes it a step further. We are almost unfair in the way that we approach background investigations, and a major focal point is racial tendencies, racial bias, discriminatory practices, anything of that nature. And we screen it on a couple of different levels. There's a traditional way of asking the questionnaire and verifying truth through the polygraph. Kent uses two systems of truth verification. We have the polygraph, but we also use another system called iDetect, and they have to clear both of those hurdles in many aspects of what we ask about, but particularly racial bias and discriminatory behavior. We also do that by doing background checks. We will go out and we will in person fly someone to, if it's, so a big concern in this area is lateral officers from other states, and I'm cognizant of that. We invest the time to fly investigators out to their department. We talk to their neighbors, we talk to their bosses, we talk to their coworkers. We may even call somebody that they've served on a police call, and a little underhanded, we'll call their ex-wife and their ex-girlfriend too. We turn over every stone that we can, and we make an effort to do that. And the third prong on that is our psychological examination with a forensic police psychologist. There's a series of questionnaires and tools, and one of the major focal points again is bias and racial tendencies and racial bias. And so we verify this on several different levels. It is an important thing. If there are any indications whatsoever that this is a problem or has been a problem in the past, that person does not get hired at Kent PD.
Great, thank you, sir. Chief Bo, same question to you.
Well, I think I'm going to answer. I'm looking at my list here. I have officer screening, backgrounds, neighbors, employers, polygraphs, girlfriends. I have all the same stuff, right? I mean, our backgrounds, we do an investigation as well. It's, you know, that's what police specialize in investigating. One of the other things I know Chief Padilla does as well as us is looks at your social media and does an analysis of, you know, are you presenting your biases on your social media? Are you saying, doing, liking, clicking, things that we don't think represent public trust and don't represent our agency by what you're doing on your social media? So that's another area that we look at. I think one of the most important things as we talk about bias is also talking about getting out of your car, being out in your community, engaging your community, because I personally believe one of the biggest things with bias is lack of healthy relationships with people who don't look like you, don't share your culture, and don't act like you. Creates a predetermined position when you actually engage people like that. And so often law enforcement engages people in crisis. We're engaging you when the 911 calls and when you're having your worst day, when you're in crisis, when you're needing help. And that is the worst time to try to build a relationship with somebody. The best time is to get out of your car ahead of time and walk into the church, walk into the cultural center, watch in Latino Civic Alliance, and engage people when there's an opportunity for growth and relationship and trust building. And that's something we encourage our officers to do. Walk into that building, tell us something. It's part of our training program is to do an assessment of the neighborhood or assessment of the community, and have the officers go in and learn something about the Islamic Culture Center. Go in there and come back and share something with me, right? Because we want them to develop those relationships during a healthy time. So We also do the Dr. Marks training. Dr. Marks is phenomenal as an instructor. Part of the plan with Dr. Marks was to have him doing community presentations in conjunction with police training. He teaches most officers in the state. One other thing I think is really key in bias is everybody has a bias. You're human, you're biased. Everybody's got the presence of bias is never going to go away. What we need to really look at too is how do you deal with the biases that are out there, right? We train to them. We have to be aware of them. We have to acknowledge they exist. And then we have to do things to slow down events so you can get out of reactionary mode and into logical thought. And those are things like crisis communications, asking questions, getting everything to slow down and be thinking with your logical mind as much as you can during crisis. So the answer is also how we train on crisis communications, and we do 40 hours of crisis training, CIT training, as well as annual refreshers to make sure officers are proficient at slowing down, breathing, thinking, talking, and trying to get that bias to be less impactful on the decision-making outcome.
Okay, so
Can I add one quick thing there, Mr. Tate?
Oh, go ahead.
So on a point, Chief Bowe reminded me of something that I think is really important. In terms of implicit bias, one of the things that creates implicit bias is conditioning. And because of our traditional systems in terms of union contracts, where officers bid the shift and they pick where they want to be. And so officers literally can work 10 years on the graveyard shift. And 10 years on graveyard shift gets you conditioned to seeing the world to about this much. One of the things that we're really trying to work on is breaking that cycle, because I think if we can get people to get our officers to experiencing the diversity of all that goes on in our city and not just what happens on Highway 99 at 3 o'clock in the morning, that is one of the biggest ways we can break through that conditioning and that bias that gets built. I don't have all the answers to that, but we are trying to work through that with our unions right now because we realize it's a huge problem.
Wow. And that's information that a lot of people don't think about is that perspective and those working conditions. And yeah. So Aubrey, can you let me see? So we're gonna hold up on the questions and the comments, from the observers, and go to question 5, and then after that, have an opportunity for the observers to ask, any questions or make any comments that they would like to have. And so question number 5 was supposed to be at around 7 o'clock. And it's kind of late, but the conversation has been going great, so it's worth it, as far as we're concerned. Question number 5. There have been significant policy changes in law enforcement in Washington state in the past few years, some of which curtails police use of force, require de-escalation practices, hold police more accountable for their actions, and in some cases require community oversight of police. Can you speak to some of these policy changes that you think might foster positive community relations? And what is your department doing or have done to address these changes?
I'll jump on this first. Somebody told me right after the legislation session, any one of these bills in and of themselves would be a massive undertaking for law enforcement. And I think there's about 10 significant bills that all came through at the same time. So the answer is, I think Chief Burien and I have been in more meetings than we care to count, trying to understand, interpret, and adjust our policy to align with the new direction for law enforcement. I think that there are goods and bads in the bills. I think the majority of it will be more positive outcomes, more feeling of trust and support in the system. I think the idea that there is the ability to decommission an officer that is interpreted to be continually acting inappropriately will build an element of trust into the system that I think a lot of people feel currently doesn't exist in the system. I will tell you, like any profession, massive change comes at you and there's going to be resistance. The officers even some of the chiefs, and Chief Padilla and I are on the front end of this, so we're not the chiefs I'm referring to, but around the state, it's a challenge. It's a big undertaking. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of change in our profession that doesn't always sit well with the officers. So there'll be some time for us to interpret it and implement it, not just from the law and policy standpoint, because that's easy, but also from the culture standpoint. The law enforcement culture standpoint needs to come to the place that these new bills are as well. So I take it as like anything, I can make anything work. Whatever you give me for resources, I'll give you 100%. And I think these bills are going to be a significant change in law enforcement. But I also think that we'll move forward and we'll work through them. I think some of your legislators on here, I think there's some discussion that there's a few words here and there that we just need a little clarity on because we have different attorneys interpreting them differently. But other than that, I think their direction to us is pretty clear that they want us operating a little bit different than we have in the past. And I think that's a good thing. I think we'll be all right in the long run and we'll make it work.
Thank you.
I agree with Chief Bo, and I think where I want to start is because I've learned that I've not done a real good job of this because I've had many discussions on it. So where I want to start is to recognize that we embrace these changes and the multitude of legislation that was passed. The majority of it is solid, is going to have the intended outcomes that we want. And where I'm at is in the few areas that we need some clarification and some tweaking. We want to have the conversations because I think we can get even better outcomes of these. I think it's also important to recognize how we got here, right? We just didn't wake up and say, hey, we want to do all these things. The question previously pointed to explicit evidence about why there were things wrong with what we were doing in law enforcement, whether it was here or across the country. Universally, we needed to look at that. And so we don't get a lot of attention to this, but chiefs like Chief Bo and others in South King County really took a very humble approach to listening and taking in the information and then trying to operationalize what the community was asking for. And I don't think enough gets paid attention to that because what happens in the media, we've talked about the media a lot, is they focus on where the conflict points are. But the reality is most of us saw this coming last June. And for the departments like Burien and Kent, we activated and operationalized about 90% of all the changes that were coming, right? Nobody had to kick me in the rear and say, get rid of, do an official policy that got rid of neck restraints and chokeholds. We did that last year. We scrapped every single use of force policy, went to our Race and Equity Advisory Board, said, here are our policies, give us some input on it. We reformatted all of them. And then we posted them online, which wasn't something we've done before, but we recognized there was a need for transparency there, and we put them out there. We made movements in terms of our use of force policy, our reporting. We've had great support from our elected leaders, the mayor and the city council. We were able to bring in a consultant to look at our data because it's not enough. The days when law enforcement can say, hey, trust us, we're not racially biased, trust us, we don't do these heinous things, are over. We're in an age, and we recognize this, where we have to prove that we're doing everything we can to stamp out any discriminatory practice and bias. And so that's the nuances and where we are and where we've headed. And it also goes to things like something that's at the heart of what Commander Hollis is doing. We got to help our people in law enforcement develop so that they have a growth mindset. They have what I refer to as intellectual humility, to be able to challenge themselves in what they believe is right and be open to the fact that they're wrong. Some of the biggest challenges we have in this regard to adapting to changes, we have had a culture that says, of course we know what's right. Of course we know what we should do. Right is right, and we're sticking to our guns. I know Chief Bo battles this heavily. And we're having to break through and get people to say, no, remember, we are a government of the people, for the people, by the people. And so we have to start with their perspective first, not our own. So a lot of work's going on that. And we could talk a lot just on that topic, but we are out in front of it. We've made the changes. we want to be at the table for some additional conversation about some of the nuances that Chief Bo indicated. So.
Okay, so thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments, Aubrey?
Oh, sorry. Representative Intimate, we have a hand waving. We got to answer that. You got to ask the hand waving question.
Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity. Chief Padilla, there was a meeting on Monday when some of your statements that you're making tonight and clarifications that you're making tonight, you did not make on Monday. So I'm trying to understand what is different about 1310 and 1054 from Monday till today. The presentation that you made at the meeting on Monday stated that there was something wrong with these particular bills and that you as a police officer and a police chief had your hands tied and could not do what the legislation had asked. I hear something different tonight. And so I'm trying to understand, did I misunderstand you on Monday or has something changed? Can you give me some clarity between today and today?
And Representative Endemann, were you at the meeting itself, just for context?
So I had the meeting recorded because I was not able to be there.
So good. We have it all. We have it recorded. We had our multimedia team there for that. And it really isn't. So the purpose of the town hall meeting was to present the information on the laws. And like I said, when I started what I just said, I have learned I need to do a better job of starting with the acknowledgement that there are good parts of the majority of everything that came out, right? So that's a lesson learned, and I learned that from some of the feedback at that meeting. So that would be some of the change, right? I can self-reflect and go, okay, that was good feedback. I can do better there. So there's that. The other part of it is I think the structure of the town hall was, our purpose wasn't to really debate the merits of the law, but to convey what the differences in the outcomes and expectations of what police officers were going to do was. And when you look at it from the end result, the practical application, that's where a lot of the questions and the concerns and the worry that the police aren't going to show up come in, right? And it was interesting. I know that Kent Reporter did their article on it, and I don't know if there were any other media. I was disappointed in the article because it made it sound as though we had this big conflict arguing match and we didn't have any good discussion. And I would not characterize that meeting as that at all. I think we had a really good discussion where there were some hard ass questions, and I had to stand and deliver right there on the spot, which, you know what, I will do every day. I'm a pretty straightforward person. I mean what I say. I think the difference you're seeing, Representative Enneman, is that I recognize that we spent too much time talking about the problems, and I didn't give enough credit to the good solutions that were there. One of the quotes that did make it in the Kent Reporter, that I even called out Steve Hodder and said, you need to write this down. I am not, no chief that I know, especially in South King, is asking for any repeal of any of those laws. Our perspective is that every year we have legislation that comes out, and guess what? Whether it's police related or not, every year we find out, there's ways we can improve those laws. And so Chief Bo and I and others want to be part of that discussion on how we take what is there and make it even better. The concerns, and I'll just put it on the table for law enforcement, is the issue with reasonable suspicion versus probable cause. I think the issues regarding less lethal and the ITA part of the law, I think those are going to be easy universal fixes. Where the real work's going to come in is, where do we really want to set the threshold for officers being able to intervene? And that's the discussion we want to have.
Okay. So I have been asked to ask you to participate in a community meeting. This is not I'm not trying to hijack this meeting, but there is another meeting that community members would like to have. And I hope that you will consider having, and it's going to be a conversation. I'm going to be facilitating that meeting. So it's not going to be yelling, it will be in conversation. But I think it's a conversation we need to have, because when I saw the recording and read the PowerPoint presentation that was presented, I was very disappointed in what I had heard that happened, what I had heard in the meeting from the recording. I can only go by the recording. Then I read the story in the Kent Reporter, which of course is I'm reading something after watching a meeting, but I am concerned, and I think it's really important, and I appreciate being invited tonight to have this discussion, but it really is important for people to know that as a legislator, being on this work group, it wasn't just ideas that we came with just because we had thoughts. We work with 8 different police agencies that work within this state. We had actually 60 pieces of legislation that you didn't even see. We picked these 12, 10, and some of them passed and some of them didn't. We know that this is hard work. We are not, the people in my work group, I can honestly say, are not anti-police. John Lovick, who has been a part of the police department for a number of years, who is retired, was working with this group. We too want to get this right because we believe it is important for the safety of not only members of the community, but the police as well. And so you will receive a formal invitation to participate in a discussion that I think is important to participate in. I know that we are in difficult times with COVID and everything else, but I also would really like to, one, be able to counter the narrative from the Monday meeting with the narrative that I have experienced in this meeting. These were 2 different meetings, 2 very different meetings.
Yeah, well, I welcome the invitation, and I'll make every effort to make myself available for that. So
thanks.
Sounds to me like there has been some growth between Monday and now, and it sounds to me like a good thing. When I can see somebody grow and not resist, change, and take input and make adaptations. And so it sounds like this question should have been given a lot more time, huh? And I'm glad to see that there's going to be some kind of follow-up around that particular issue, because I read the newspaper article as well. And so I was glad to hear what I heard tonight, which is a lot different than what kind of came out in the newspaper. So any other, I know that people, it's past 7:30 and we haven't ignored that, but if you have to go, go. And let's take a couple more questions since we started late. Let's take a couple more questions if there are any before we close. Aubrey, do you have any?
You want me to ask my one question that I brought up as an example?
No. So there are no more. There are no more in the chat.
No. Oh, yeah. Let me see. We received a thank you from Senator Kaiser for providing a forum. Thank you very much. And a thank you to Chief Padilla for your honesty and transparency regarding our youth. And we don't have any other hands up. Teresa said she could ask her question at a later time. So I think that, unless I'm wrong, please ask it.
There was one from Rain.
Okay, let me go.
yeah, I saw that one. I was hoping we might find some time to get to that one if I could. So that one was I think it was related to me. Maybe it was Commander Hollis as well. I don't know.
So could you read it, Aubrey?
Yeah,
or whoever
the question is, how does everything that has happened regarding race relations in the last year affect you as an officer of color?
So you guys are, for those who haven't worked with me a lot, I am pretty straightforward, and I'm going to be straight and say that because of my appearance, I'm not going to pretend to have the impacts that most people, BIPOC community members, are going to. If you look at me, you listen to me, you don't see a person of color. And so let's be straight up about that. So the impacts on me have not been direct, and I haven't all of a sudden had this epiphany of my role and where I stand and the relationships and all of that. What it has done, however, is it has caused me to reflect and think about what that means in a different way than I used to before. It has caused me to think about what it means for our officers that are very clearly identifiable as BIPOC community members and what the impact is on them. And that's where I think the growth has been for me, in the short answer. I don't want to sit here and pretend that all of a sudden this has been a huge change and impact on me, because when I drive around, when I'm in the supermarket, when people see me, they don't go, oh, that's a Spanish man. That just to be honest, I just look like another white guy, which bums me out sometimes, but that's just the way it is. That's the way God made me. So there you go. So, but I am Latino, but until you hear my name, you don't know that, right? So that would be my answer.
Chief Bo? Any input?
Well, I think I am not going to fall within the BIPOC community. I am Norwegian and German. One thing I will say is a lot of the officers on my department have come to me and talked about the two lives they live, and that, you know, they work this profession, they wear this uniform, but a lot of times when they go to their barbecues and picnics and spend time with their family, it's a very different experience than heavily critical of our profession, and it's very difficult. So I certainly think there's some grace to be given officers that do have to go home and spend time with family, who often is highly critical of this profession. And certainly from the last 18 months have been extreme examples of really a difficult position those officers are in. And as you look at their health and welfare, it's a difficult time for some of those officers. So really giving them some grace to process and to spend time making sure that they're healthy is super important.
So maybe that question would be for Bobby also. You want to speak to that?
Sure. Although I didn't think that I was going to be doing a whole lot of speaking in this thing today. So, you know, for me, it's kind of like walking a tightrope. You know, there's been good experiences and there have been bad experiences. And some of them have come from community members. Some of them have come from some fellow officers. But what I like about this position that I'm in right now, and I don't mean the position that I work, but with all the events that have gone on since George Floyd's death and everything, is that, you know, it's an opportunity for those of us that are members of the BIPOC community to actually make a change from the inside. You know, we recognize that we can find ways of, you know, building bridges between community members. We can do some things that maybe our white partners can't necessarily do. And so being able to be that beacon, so to speak, or that bridge builder, I feel like is a great opportunity for folks like myself to reach out into the community and find those and have those conversations. And sometimes those conversations that I have with community members have been very tough. But my perspective is I want to listen to them as a police officer, and so I sit and listen. And then when I have an opportunity to tell my story about what it's like being a Black police officer, kind of navigating this world right now, or, you know, I've been in this business for almost 20 some odd years now. You know, these are challenges that I've always faced in my career. And, you know, the officers that I work with, I won't say are racist. They're my friends, they're my buddies, they're my pals. And I would lay my life out on the line for them, just as I would lay my life out on the line for any community member that was in danger. And so, you know, it's been tough. I would say that it's quite the tightrope that I choose to walk. But again, I choose to see that I'm in a position now, as I've gone up through the ranks, to help others, to provide a story to not only community members, but also my fellow officers, to kind of help provide that different perspective. So While it's been challenging, the great thing is everyone's been willing to learn. We've had some good, tough conversations, but along the way, I've been able to help change some minds and even help change some perspectives of people. So as weird as it sounds, I guess living off the challenge of change has been an adventure, to say the least.
Thank you. And thanks to all of our special guests and your information in particular. And, perhaps we'll find a way to carry on the conversation. So back to you, Barbara.
Thanks, Melvin. Oh, great conversation, both of the chiefs, very enlightening. And thank you to everyone that participated. I just want to remind everyone, this is a one workshop in a series of 4. We have our work, the next one is work on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then we have a discussion on the critical race theory, if you're not aware. And last is radical self-care and self-love, mental health. So those are our 4 workshops, but it's been a very interesting, enlightening conversation tonight. Any last remarks from our chiefs?
I guess I'll jump on it. I just thank you for sharing the space with us and having the talk. I think all conversations lead to positive outcomes if we come together and talk. I think that's the most important thing you can do, is have the humility as community and the humility as officers to all come in and give grace to other people's perspectives. And from that conversation, only good things can happen. So I think that's the best part of this conversation. And I know a lot of this is Kent-centric, but I certainly am appreciative of the opportunity to come and join and share. So I appreciate it. And thank you.
Thank you, guys. Oh, so Barb, real quick. So tonight's event is recorded. So I think as I send out the recording, I may get some questions of people who may have had questions who didn't get them answered. Would you guys be open? I have both your email addresses. I understand time constraints, but would you be open to maybe answering some questions if we email them over? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I could, I also want to thank you for this opportunity. It's been great. I think, as we've discussed and we talked about Monday versus today, one of the things I would add is that there's context to the relationship, right? So if you take me today and then see me tomorrow, and if we don't have an ongoing relationship, there's going to be questions, right? There's no way to have the grace to understand the totality of who I am until we spend more time with each other. So to that point, I am opening up the door, and I am saying, please invite me. Let me know how I can be part of the conversation. I'm the type of person that would much rather have this be in person, because I think there's a lot of communication loss, but we'll do it however we can under the circumstances. But more context, we call it contact theory. The more that we spend time together, the more grace we build, the more understanding we have. And so when we have the difficult conversations, it doesn't lead to hurt feelings or feelings of you're disingenuous kind of thing, right? So let's do it again. Let's do it some more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And Bobby, last, any comments from you, the co-facilitator?
No, I'm just fortunate that we had this opportunity to have this conversation. My hope is always that not only do we start off with this conversation, but we also then move to action next. And so, the more opportunities that we have to continue to work together, I think the better off that we all, community and police, will be. So thank you again for inviting me into this space today.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you so much, everyone for participating, the observers, and just have a nice evening and be safe. Take care of yourselves. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.